Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are in the world, and welcome to today's HDI webinar, The Next Step, Employee-Focused Service Management. Today's webinar is brought to you by Semmanage. Semmanage is on the web at semmanage.com, and there's a link right in the Attachments tab on your BreakTalk window. HDI is where technical support professionals belong. We'd like to remind you not to miss early bird pricing for the new Service Management World Conference, October 15th through 17th. You have to register by June 1st, and you'll find a link to Service Management World's website in the Attachments tab. You can connect with HDI on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, and in our members-only community site, HDI Connect. I'm Roy Atkinson, HDI's senior writer and analyst, and with me today is Mark Stitt, and we'll be introducing Mark in a moment. If you're experiencing any technical problems today, refresh your browser. It's really the best thing you can do, whether you're not seeing the slides advance or not hearing properly. Refresh your browser. It cures all ills here on BreakTalk. You can participate in the Q&A session by asking questions at any time during the webcast, and they will be answered during the Q&A session toward the end. We'll answer as many questions as time allows. You can download the slides from today's presentation by opening the Attachments tab on your BreakTalk screen. And also, there will be audience polls today, and you can respond in the Vote tab below the presentation window. So make sure that you are aware of where those tabs are. Just look around your screen, find the Downloads tab, the Attachments tab, the Vote tab, which is where the polls will be, and look through the information that's provided there. The slides will automatically advance throughout the event. Today's webinar will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live webcast, and you'll receive an email reminder to let you know that it's available. How convenient. That's a great thing. All right, let's introduce Mark. Mark Stitt has more than 20 years of product marketing and management experience at companies like Dell, Quest Software, Syncom Systems, and Earth Solutions. He has extensive knowledge of systems management, cloud computing, big data analytics, and customer service software. At Semmanage, Mark leads project marketing and strategic partnerships. Thanks, and great to have you with us today, Mark.
Thank you very much, Roy. Glad to be here.
All right. We look forward to hearing from you, and we'll probably have some conversation. I'm going to start off with some facts and interesting tidbits about expanding service management across the organizations. One of the things that we know from our surveys is that more than half, 56% of organizations say they use IT service management tools outside of IT. Now, does that really indicate that they're doing service management outside of IT? That's an open question, but they're using the service management tools in places like facilities, HR, customer service, training, finance, asset management, any place that they can convince that should be part of this program of expanding service management across the organization. They are trying to adapt and use it, and there's a bunch of reasons why we should expand service management across the organization. Somebody's just asked, is there sound? And the answer is yes, but obviously they're not going to hear me say that. They should refresh their web browser or unmute their speakers. So expanding service management can go into any other aspects of the organization. IT, of course, has been doing service management for a long time. It's developed frameworks and methodologies, some of which I listed here. ITIL, of course, being the most widely used framework for service management. Six Sigma, Lean, KCS for knowledge management. And that it should be noticed as I go down that list, knowledge management is increasingly important, and organizations realize that knowledge management is like the number 2 most considered a must-have technology in support centers now, simply because as we expand the purview of service management across the organization, knowledge has to expand as well. It's so important to integrate knowledge management into the fabric of service management when you expand it across organizations, it'll make your life a lot easier. So if you're not doing good knowledge management now, please take a look at KCS. It's one of the best ways, and HDI teaches KCS as well. Kaizen, those little improvements across the organization, COBIT, ISO 9000, and the other ISO standards as well. Agile methodologies, all of these different frameworks and methodologies that are being adopted, and many of them didn't start in IT, but became thought of as IT frameworks and methodologies like Lean, that came from manufacturing. We're really have to be conscious of how people are thinking about service management, and there's a lot of back-end work that needs to go into expanding service management across the organization. And these are some of the processes that need to be considered as you go out, because service catalog is amazingly important. Incident management or case management, and I have to mention here that language is really important as you consider expanding service management in your organization. When you talk about an incident, that makes sense to us and sounds familiar to us in IT. It does not sound good in any way, shape, or form to people in HR or emergency services. So you might want to consider talking about case management rather than incident management. Certainly change management, knowledge management, customer relationship management, problem management. These are all processes that we're familiar with, backed by the capabilities of the tools that we use for service management. But make sure that you're making the proper linguistic and considerations as you expand these across the organization. And we're going to talk a little bit more about why you might want to do that. So one of the things that can happen for IT, for example, is that you can really become a trusted advisor to the business organization or the educational institution or the medical organization, whatever it happens to be where you work. But you have to go through these steps to make sure that you're not just using a tool, that you are in fact doing service management and then is making an impact in your organization. It is making the lives of the employees, your fellow coworkers, better. It requires cultural change, and that's a big procedure that should be built into your initiative. It can't just be bolted on at the end. You really need to consider organizational change and cultural change as part of the way that this is going to happen. IT has to know about it not being about IT. It shouldn't be about us. IT has its own house in order, meaning that if you're doing service management poorly, it's going to be a very difficult job for you to convince other business units where you work to follow your lead. So you got to make sure that you're doing it well and providing for the needs of the organization outside of IT before you try to go say, hey, we got these great ways of doing service management. We have all the tools to do it. Why don't you let us help you out with that? And as I mentioned earlier, adopt the language of the business units. Apparently a lot of people are not hearing audio. Again, if you are, just make sure that you refresh your browser. If you're not, I can't really help you except to say that you should be unmuted. I'll post a note in a second. So just make sure that you have the right tools and adopt the right language, and you can expand service management. As I said, more than half of organizations are doing something along these lines already, and I think it's important to do this, and Mark is going to talk about some reasons why as well. But here are some of the key things to remember. One of the opportunities for your organization is that rather than having disparate databases, so you have a database for HR, you have a database for facilities, you have a database for IT, you have a database for every every single organization unit that is in your organization, they have to get things from different places. So when we try to put this information together, we don't get a clear picture of the customers and the employees. So if we get a centralized way of gathering that data and having it talk to us directly, that's one of the key advantages that your organization can have. And it also contributes to having a consistent customer experience across the organization. Make sure that you have the same experience for every person in the organization, and that they know how to get things done when they need to. So just that's one of the goals and one of the aims and one of the opportunities that you have by doing expanded service management, if you want to call it enterprise service management, whatever you want to call it. We're talking about employee-focused today. And here's one of the reasons why. People say, well, why should we care about whether our employees are happy or not? They should be happy to get paid. And if you just look at this information, this is from a 28-year study by Alex Edmonds. It was published in the Harvard Business Review. And he found, over the years that he did this study, that organizations that had happy employees were doing better. They were outperforming similar organizations in terms of stock performance. So this is financial results that these organizations were getting. And moreover, as it says here, the results suggest that it's employee satisfaction that causes good performance rather than good performance allowing a firm to invest in employee satisfaction. We're also going to talk a little bit today later on about customer satisfaction, and I know that customer satisfaction is super important. That should be a big goal for everybody, and make sure that you have that as your utmost goal. But happy employees make happy customers, and there's lots of data to prove that. So happy employees produce better business results, and happy employees produce better results for your customers. You can't have a stronger argument than that, can you, Mark? I think that pretty much covers the bases of those two constituencies that you have to serve. So let's talk a little bit about why service management can be focused on employees, and this will help us out.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Roy, and thanks for having me today. I wanted to start out with kind of a connecting point to what Roy had just talked about. About 3 months ago, I was at an industry conference and was approached by, a couple hundred IT professionals when I was at the Samanage booth. And each of them, in asking me about service management type questions, took a very internal point of view. They asked me questions about ITIL. They asked me questions about their change management process. And while I enjoyed all those kinds of questions, the thing that dawned on me most is that none of them asked about improving their employees' experience. None of them asked about increasing the productivity around their organization through service management. And I found that very interesting. And a case can really be made, as Roy started to make, that happier employees equal happier customers, and ultimately generate other great business results. So why in IT are we today very focused more introspectively on our own systems and processes and not thinking a little bit more broadly? So that's what I intend to do today, is to talk about this new era of the employee and how employee-focused service management really is the path forward. So let's get going. So what we're going to cover is what service management throughout the organization means. We all know about IT service, and many of you know about ITIL and those disciplines, but what does it mean to truly deploy this across an organization? We're then going to talk about why organizations like yours need to have a bigger angle on employee success and have a correlation to how that affects the business. Maybe it's customer success, maybe it's revenue, maybe it's keeping your customers happy. And then finally, we'll talk about how employee service management can bring positive change to the employees themselves and then ultimately your customers, and kind of connect the dots there. All right? So first, what does service management throughout the organization mean? What are we really saying here with employee service management? Well, in short, we're really looking to unlock untapped potential for all the employees in the organization. We all know the slogan, the age-old tagline of "people are your greatest asset." And while we say that, and that's kind of commonplace, it doesn't always feel that way. So for a moment, put yourself in the situation at your current employer or somewhere else maybe that you've been, and ask yourself, was my service experience, good? Was it helpful to me? And I think many of you might say, well, IT was pretty good when I had a password issue or I had an issue with an application, but when I wanted to do something else, like enroll in benefits or have a contract reviewed or simply get a new badge to get into the building because I left mine at home, those things can be very cumbersome and very, very inconsistent. So what we're talking about here in terms of enabling the employees is providing streamlined service delivery to yield more productivity for employees and even increase employee happiness and retention. And it all goes toward happy employees equaling happy customers. Let's get our internal house in order, and then ultimately we will make our customers happier as well. And I have a number of illustrations from our customers of how they did this and sort of their path from just an IT-centric culture to a more of an employee-centric one. So what does it mean? Well, when you think about the employee, their vantage point, and we can all relate to this as employees, this person's saying, I want to get the services I need, where I need them, and when I need them. Maybe I'm at home, maybe I'm on a mobile device, maybe I'm not near my computer and I need to call someone. The line of business leaders are saying, my team can better serve our customers because I'm getting the things that I need from these different constituents around the organization. Again, I gave a few examples a moment ago, but the person that can't get their badge and get in the building will have a hard time serving customers. But it goes beyond that. It could be a business application and an issue with that could be several days or even weeks to get resolved. What if we could resolve that in minutes? And then finally, IT leaders, and a lot of you on this webinar today can relate to this, what if we can deliver great service experiences across the company, across these different disciplines like HR, facilities, and anything else beyond IT? What would that mean to the overall productivity and success of the company? So we believe the next opportunity in service is to treat your employees like your best customers. So, Roy, do you have something to add?
I would just add, to the point where you say, and as I mentioned as well, that happy employees make happy customers. The year before last, in our annual survey, I looked at the results, and I looked at the employee satisfaction number that we get, and out of something like 406 organizations, a certain percentage had happier employees. And I said, well, let's look at customer satisfaction and employee happiness in relation to each other. So we did a little cross-tab. We said, let's look at just the organizations with the satisfied or very satisfied employees and look at their customer satisfaction rating. And what we found is that on average, it was 5 points higher for customer satisfaction, which is a big difference in this industry. That's an immense difference. And so that's proof in the pudding that it's not just a saying, it is in fact true. Happy employees, happy customers.
Exactly. Thanks for adding that. And a 5% difference can make you better than your competitors, and it can solidify your position in the market and keep that loyalty from customers nice and high in terms of what we're looking for. So what does this shift kind of look like? Well, we like to call it the era of the employee. And as I mentioned from that industry event a few months ago, the way it was, and really the way it kind of still is in many cases, is we've all worked very hard to have efficient service management, primarily in IT. Things are certainly more organized, things are more automated, and you've centralized a lot of your IT-centric service management functions into one place. Most organizations today have a service desk for IT. Many have portals where their customers can log a ticket or even look at a knowledge article. That's kind of where we are today, and there's certainly nothing wrong with that. what we want to build on from there is shifting over to the right. And to enable this type of transformation that Roy and I are talking about requires thinking more consumer-like. It needs to be more seamless. It needs to be smart. And it needs to be meaningful, right? So we think about some of those brands in our lives that we, kind of align with. Companies like Zappos or Amazon or Southwest. These are companies that have really high customer satisfaction and favor. And, their employees have to be very, very productive and very, very much aligned to the customer needs. Otherwise, they wouldn't have that high status in their market segments. And so part of the reason they're leaders is they're delivering exceptional service. They're very predictive to what our needs will be. And I would contend their employees are among the happiest and most productive. Otherwise, they wouldn't be able to do that. So, as we think about that sort of introspective view that I talked about, of just thinking about our group or the IT processes, let's broaden our horizons and think about how do customers want to interact, with these systems. Well, they certainly, as I said, want them to be seamless. They want solutions in the background like AI and machine learning that make them more smart, and they need to be meaningful. I want you to know who I am and what my needs are and anticipate those needs before I ask. So only when a more mature, broader view of service management is taken can we really anticipate those. So the employee benefits here certainly is less frustration and greater productivity. They can better serve customers, and they have one portal for all of their requests, regardless of what department or area of the company that it might be. So we're working at Samanage to put customers at the center of service management again and help you as IT leaders focus on those customers internally so they can focus on the customers externally. Roy, anything to add? No? So what are some examples? Well, you think about your organization and maybe today you're leading IT or you play a key role in IT. And that's fine for managing break fix or employee onboarding. Those kinds of things might be done out of IT. And as Roy's stat of 56% showed, some of you in the industry are doing that. But here are some new opportunities. Opportunities in HR to have health benefits or 401k enrollment. Facilities requests that are very common, like a maintenance issue or getting an HVAC check. You've all been in a very hot office or a very cold office and need someone to take care of that ahead of your large meeting where there's going to be guests. But who do you go to? And then a lot of leading organizations are starting to take a look at what we call shared services. That's where there's these different business processes that include more than one area. Could include IT, could include finance, might include legal. And in that workflow, multiple people need to play a role, but the employee is sitting there saying, I just want this service to be executed. I don't really know and I don't really care how many different departments might have to interact. And these are services where organizations waste a lot of time, unfortunately, and time that you don't have in many cases. So, our question in this is, what if your organization could have these seamless services throughout the different departments and enable and empower each organization to become a service provider? What if you could become more proactive than reactive by publishing these services in a service catalog that can be selected and worked through? And let's have more meaningful service interactions to really understand between the agent and the requester, what exactly do they need if one of those services isn't sort of out of the box ready for them. All of these things are going to add up to a more unified service experience for employees.
And Mark, there I would just reiterate what I said earlier about having that central repository of data and an experience that goes all the way across the organization. And just think about the amount of time that it can save people and the amount of consternation it can save people if, whether your chair squeaks or your computer's broken, you just contact the same place, and because most employees don't care who fixes it as long as it gets fixed. As you said, Mark, it doesn't matter how many organizations are behind the interface that service has, as long as people know how to get the service done. And if there's one place to do that, so much the better and easier for them.
That's great. Yeah. And isn't it interesting that IT is often held accountable to these very high standards and SLAs and 5 nines in terms of uptime for the applications, but these other groups really aren't. And I would contend that needs to change, because to your point, an employee that has a need deserves an SLA. They deserve some notion of when this is going to be fulfilled so that they can continue on with their job. I mean, we've all started at a company and have gone through onboarding only to realize there's something 6 or 8 weeks later that wasn't done. And now it's causing a problem for us or even our whole team. And those things can be prevented. I'll tell you, this really gets important when you have organizations of scale, into the thousands of employees, as well as more geographically dispersed or decentralized organizations, meaning this is a division of a company and they have their own HR and their own facilities. And as these things become more and more distributed or fragmented, this problem gets more acute, because employees across the different divisions can't get what they need because it's very, very inconsistent. So I think that starts to make the case for why this is important. So let's move on to the topic of why organizations need to focus on this and sort of the impact of it. And I think that this is really going to be particularly interesting because we have a few customer case studies to share. One customer of Samanage is an organization called Yorkshire Water. They're out of the UK, and they're a water utility, very large scale, there in England. And they've been a longtime customer of ours. And interestingly, they have hundreds of services deployed across their organization in these different departments. And they were really ahead of their time in many ways, because before the industry was even talking about or thinking about employee service management, they were doing it. And this gentleman, Tom Reed, who leads some of their software integration work, he said, look, Samanage isn't just a ticketing tool. It's a platform that continuously allows us to enhance our customer service experience within the organization. So what he's speaking to there is the case for employee service, that the field techs are out in the field, like this gentleman here, maybe coming to one of your homes to do something, and he has everything he needs at his fingertips so that he can serve you better. And if there is an issue affecting you, he has a path of integration all the way back to figure out who in the organization can help. Really, really interesting story. Again, over the last 5 years, hundreds of these workflows and services across different departments. Looks like we have a question here, Roy.
We do indeed. Do you want to take that now, or do you want to leave it for Q&A later?
Yeah, let's take it here.
Okay. So the question is, do you agree it would be very important to optimize inbound channels for various services, primarily to keep the cost per contact a reasonable cost? I wouldn't want to pay a level 2 desktop support tech to take calls on a squeaky chair. Can you talk about inbound channel differentiation and challenges with privacy protection? I wouldn't want my desktop tech dealing with sensitive medical information for processing a leave of absence.
It's an excellent question. I think it's timely, given your example of the squeaky chair, and you think, certainly in this era of privacy for employees and customers. Essentially, this is part of the case for employee service management, that you've got to think about everybody in the organization has the potential to be a service provider. And in doing that, we want to set up those services and those sort of paths in terms of the workflow to get to the right people that have the right authorization to understand that. So the example of a squeaky chair, that's not that sensitive. let's route those kinds of things to our level 3 or 4 facilities person. Practically anybody could do that, whereas our level 1 person is responsible for HVAC or those more material kinds of things. To the other point about privacy protection, let's set up another service around benefits enrollment, which would be a great example where there's Social Security numbers and there's other confidential information about a person's family. Let's have that go to the HR leader or their designee for benefits and only that person. So today in a lot of organizations, this is done via email and it gets forwarded around to kind of anybody. Let's be buttoned up and set this up for the right request to the right person at the right time with the right SLA. And I hope that answers your question there. Let's go forward with another case study, and then I see there's a few other questions. There's another organization that we work with called ACHC in the Carolinas. And this gentleman, Bob Gardner, had a very interesting finding. He said that, we deployed Samanage in our marketing department and used the service catalog for all of these different requests. And they applied that same methodology as we're talking about here to IT, HR, and facilities to create a single system for all of their employees. And really, that's a testament of what we've been talking about, that Bob is providing his organization one portal and working with the line of business and departmental leaders to set up the services that matter most, kind of the 80-20 rule, so that those can be streamlined and we only bring in those level 1 or 2 type people, as the person asked, for the things that are sort of out of band or more sensitive.
Cool. Mark, do you want to do an audience poll at this point? I think we have one that's kind of applicable since we're looking at the case studies here.
Let's do it.
All right. So if you folks that are listening in go under the Vote tab, you'll be able to see this poll. I'm going to start the voting. And the question is, in your organization, do teams other than IT deliver a consistent service management experience? So just what Mark was talking about. And the choices are, no, only IT delivers the service desk. 1 or 2 other departments, say HR and facilities. Yes, we have a shared services approach. So what is your current status here? And, well, this is interesting because it looks like there's definitely a heavy-duty answer. As we watch the results come in, we're going to leave it open for another 20 seconds or so. Oh, there we go. We're getting a little bit more of a differentiation now. Do teams other than IT deliver a consistent service management approach? So across the organization, and that's what we were talking about a little bit with having one place to go, one kind of an interface, one portal where everybody knows where to go to get information and get their issues addressed. Okay, I'm going to stop the voting. And I always want to say, stop the voting. Interesting results. 35% of you said that only IT delivers the service desk. 42%, so a little bit more, we'll go up to 45% now as the last results come in. 1 or 2 other departments like HR and facilities do deliver a service management approach. And about 19% of you, so about 1/5, said you'd have a shared services approach to this, which is what Mark has been talking about here. So 35% say only IT, 45% said 1 or 2 other departments, and 1/5 of you said your organization has a shared services approach, so it's a little bit more widespread than just 1 or 2 departments. Great, thanks very much for voting. And Mark, take it away.
Yeah, I mean, these results show that this group on the webinar are a little bit more advanced than those in your study, Roy, that you talked about earlier at 56%.
Yep.
This is interesting that many of you are on this march beyond IT and looking at these other, kind of options around the organization. I think that full shared services approach, I'll give a case study there in a moment, is that kind of upper 20%, you guys are doing really well with that. I think that is, the next 5 years of service management. Those of you that are kind of laggards, either IT only or just maybe one or two departments, know that this is hard. I think a lot of the customers that we work with, and when we talk with them about why they're not, doing more of this or what their aspirations are, they often tell us our service management solution is very limiting. Many have what we call a wrong fit solution. These are technologies that were really never designed for ITSM, and if they were designed for ITSM, they're not designed for anything but. And I think that part of the characteristics there is to have a very intuitive product with a service portal that has a customizable workflow engine that allows really anybody to develop these service definitions, anyone deputized that is, that knows what they're trying to do and can set those up. So to have a facilities manager or an HR leader have a little bit of training and guidance on how to set this up. We have customers that are deploying 5, 10 services a week and launching those. So in many cases, there's limitations to the tools out on the market that prevent this type of adoption. So interesting findings. Thank you.
All right, great. And we have more polls coming, so hang in there.
So, on the topic of shared services, let me talk about an organization that's doing this exceptionally well, and that's Wyndham Hotel Group. Many of you know Wyndham, worldwide leader, Fortune 1000 organization. And Wyndham has this philosophy that they call "Count on Me." And I love this kind of philosophy because it not only is about serving the customer, the IT organization and leadership of the company want that to be for their franchisees as well as their employees. So Scott Strickland, who's the CIO at Wyndham Hotel Group, is an exceptional leader, I think beyond the next generation of leaders in this area, because he's established a full employee service, platform with Samanage, and it is a shared services approach across the organization. So they're focused on IT now, and they have a focus on HR, facilities, and these other departments around the organization. This is a 10,000-person organization. So when I talk about at scale, you think about how many people are positively impacted by this strategy. But it goes beyond that. They have about 9,000 franchisees, which are properties that all of us have maybe stayed in around the world. So when you're checking into one of their properties and there's an issue with your reservation or there's some other problem that the corporate group can take care of, that type of employee and franchisee service experience back to corporate means you get served faster and better, and there's reduced issues when you go to stay at one of their properties. So taking this holistic shared services view is much, much better when you think about the scale of their employees as well as their franchisees, and it's really bringing the entire organization together. We do have a video on our YouTube channel as well as Samanage.com featuring Scott Tuttle, who talks all about the story, and it's really an inspiration to IT leaders everywhere who want to go down this path and a little bit of guidance for them as well.
Cool. Do you want to try another poll, Mark? We've got one that kind of aligns here, speaking of alignment.
Sure. Let's do it.
All right. Let's go to the vote. Let's go to the vote tab now on your BrightTalk screen. And this question is, where is your organization in terms of aligning customer satisfaction with employee success? So remember what I said before about the results in customer satisfaction being 5 points higher in organizations that had more satisfied employees. So do you measure those things together? Do you try to align them? So, you track customer satisfaction independent of employee success. You track customer satisfaction and make slight service updates for our employees based on feedback. We have a program in place to prioritize employee service improvements in alignment with customer satisfaction goals. And some organizations, obviously, don't track customer satisfaction. So let's see what your responses are. Where is your organization in terms of aligning customer satisfaction with employee success. Results are still coming in. We're going to keep it open for a little more than 5 seconds or so, give you a chance to respond, and then I will go through the results. Okay, I'm stopping the voting. And wow, 47% of you said we track customer satisfaction, but it's independent of employee success, which I think is the case, and actually in most of the organizations that I'm aware of anyway. Not really surprised at that high a percentage. 21% said you track customer satisfaction and make slight service updates for the employees based on the feedback. That makes sense. 10% of you said we have a program in place to prioritize employee service improvements in alignment with customer satisfaction goals. So that's the main answer to the poll question. Only 10% of you say that, and 21% of you, more than a fifth, say we do not track customer satisfaction. And that is absolutely amazing to me, that you would not in some way, shape, or form track customer satisfaction. Whether you deliver internal or external service, obviously you're hoping that you are providing the services that are needed in a way that makes sense to the people receiving the service. But if you're not tracking it somehow, whether it's surveys or focus groups or conversations or however it is, formal, informal, frequent, once in a while, in some way, you would think that most organizations do track that, but obviously a fifth of you, at least in this group, don't.
Yeah, it doesn't surprise me quite as much. I think it's a journey that really the journey starts from both ends. I think we do have some notion of IT service success and how employees think about IT, and that's been in place for some number of years. I think other organizations have CSAT type things for their customers, be it surveys or for loyal customers, NPS type things. And really the strategy is to go from both angles to establish that and then to correlate them. So if you're one of the groups that only is focused on IT today and need or want to move to other departments, I think establishing an employee CSAT score and survey process, and something that we provide our customers is a way to do kind of a survey on those. Were you satisfied, and sort of 1 to 5 type of thing. That can help you a lot to know I'm doing well in IT and I'm doing well across my different departments. From a CSAT standpoint, on the customer side, whatever solution you're using there and whatever strategy, you can employ the same types of things. I think in the middle, it's the correlation to understand when a customer was dissatisfied, it's correlating that data to understand, was it in any way something internally we could have solved? And my favorite example is, you're on the phone with some kind of financial situation, be it a credit card or a stockbroker type of thing. You really want this to be very much a real-time experience. And if it isn't real-time and the person on the other end can't help you, your CSAT rapidly declines as risk sits in. So, in that particular case, it's a very easy correlation that I can't process this person's transaction or I can't resolve their issue, and that might be a system or an application issue. So that correlation is a little straighter. But I'm not surprised, at the kind of mixed results, Roy, that the companies are struggling with this.
Thanks, Mark.
Great. So let's move forward. I do want to pick up on another question here in a moment. So how does employee service management bring positive change to employees and customers? So we talked a little bit about a few illustrations of some managed customers and what they're doing, but let's look at some market data. McKinsey & Company, who many of you know, had this great study on the secret to delighting customers, and they noted that companies that offer an exceptional customer experience can exceed their peers' gross margin by more than 26%. And you think about the examples I gave, like a Southwest or an Amazon, these are the kinds of organizations that are doing that, and even more, because they've figured out how to provide those services and do it in a way that their employees can align to and fulfill very successfully. But we also see that emotionally engaged customers, like all of us, are times more likely to buy or recommend or repurchase a product from those brands. A colleague of mine does a lot of shopping with Zappos, the shoe company, and she's very loyal to them because of their outstanding customer service and that ongoing commitment. So when she engages with an agent, either over chat or over email or over the phone with whatever type of matter, it's quickly resolved because that person has everything they need at their fingertips, whether it's an order fulfillment issue, whether it's a software outage kind of issue, whatever might be impacting them, they clearly are able to resolve those things very quickly in order to provide that exceptional customer service. Roy, anything to add to this? I know some of this matches and overlaps your research.
Yeah, I think that I just think that there are some obvious connections between the employee engagement or happiness, depending on how you measure it, and customer satisfaction or happiness or engagement, depending on how you measure it in your organization. That a lot of organizations, obviously from our poll results, a lot of people haven't explored it yet, and I think that as we expand and organizations become more dependent on technology and the principles of service management get more traction within the organizations, this is going to become apparent that tracking this stuff and focusing on this particular aspect of it, getting the employees happy and helping customers to be happy at the same time is going to have an impact on the business results. So everything that we've said together here.
Great. I think we should handle a couple of the questions, related to this. There's one that we may have covered, but we'll cover it a little differently. How do you recommend measuring CSAT scores for internal service? I really recommend that kind of 1 through 5 type of survey. That something was fulfilled for you. Maybe it's a new employee badge from the HR group, and a simple survey goes out to say, on a scale of 1 to 5, 5 being the most, how satisfied were you? And you click 4 because you felt it was a little late. It took 4 or 5 days, for instance. That's all about an iterative cycle that now the HR leader in that case can go back through those surveys and say, there's something wrong with the service that I've offered. Either it's taking too long or it's not quite right, and then you can start to iterate on that for improvement. We worked with a customer that they found that their HR onboarding process in one office took about 5 days, which for many that's pretty reasonable. Whereas other divisions, other parts of their company, it was 3 or 4 weeks. So why the discrepancy? And part of that discrepancy is the services being defined for the onboarding process are inconsistent from one location to the next. So as an HR leader in this particular case, somebody responsible for employee onboarding and success and the rapid sort of adoption into the organization, that's something that I would care about. So now I can target those areas where there's issues and even further improve the things that are already working. Hope that one answers your question.
And I would just add there, Mark, most organizations that we're aware of that respond to our surveys, especially our big annual survey, do use a CSAT approach. They are sending surveys out based on, tickets. So a ticket gets marked resolved, the survey gets sent out automatically to the customer in whatever frequency they have defined, whether it's every single ticket, whether it's, a random, it could be every 15th or every 17th customer, however you define it, again, in your organization. That is the way that most organizations track it. The only thing that I always say when the question of surveys comes up is keep it simple, keep it easy for the customer to do it. You will cut down on survey fatigue, which is where, okay, this is the 5th survey I've answered. I don't want to answer any more surveys. The more questions you ask, the more complicated you make that survey, the fewer responses you're going to get over time. So just keep it very, very simple and short. It could be just that one question. How satisfied were you 1 through 5? Or, happy face, sad face. Just, make sure that you have a way to do it and make it easy for the customer. Like everything else, keep the friction low, keep the customer happy.
Absolutely. There's another related question here about, can you give some more examples how to directly connect employee service to customer satisfaction? Yes, I think that this is changing the conversation, again, from more of a internal group perspective to working with the stakeholders. So here's a good example. If you have a customer service manager, somebody really accountable for that, have them work with them on what surveys and what techniques they're using to get information from their customers. And once you start getting some of those survey results back, you can understand with the customer records, what was the issue? Was it a lateness issue? Was it a wrong product issue? And it might indicate, as we've seen, issues that go out to the different departments that are involved, where there's now a training issue that HR maybe needs to pick up on. Or there's a facilities issue because there's a shipping and system-related issue. So part of that is a conversation between the internal service management leaders and more of the external customer leaders, and how they want to correlate that. And then systems can be applied and processes can be applied to share that data and try to form those correlations. I think, I would say under 5% of organizations are really tying that together, primarily because they're not having a conversation about what are they learning on the customer side that could be better applied internally. And most of them, or many of them, come down to process inefficiencies, training issues, or gaps in systems that happen when you're looking at things in more of a distributed way. So hopefully that one helps as well. Roy, anything to add there?
Not really. Did you want to tackle another question that's come in? And I think it's a great question.
Sure.
How do you get employees to use the service portal? So you create this portal for everybody to go to. You decide what services are going to be offered up from this unified or shared services approach, and then you need to drive adoption, and you need to track adoption and make sure that people know how to get there. So what are some ways that you think you can do that, Mark?
It's a great question. I think the short answer is internal PR about the services being offered by the different groups. Put up posters, send out emails, enable or empower the leaders of the different business units to share what this new portal has to offer. And if it's of value and it's easy to use, to Roy's point earlier, then people will use it. Knowing that everything is there at their fingertips and it's evolving, I think will foster that, especially if word gets around that it's faster and it's more intuitive than chasing 2 or 3 different people across different buildings that you think would be the right ones. So I think it's first the internal PR, and then second the reinforcement of how this is working. But it is a challenge. There are, there's different cultural reasons, why people still want to go by phone or walk by someone's desk. And that will always be a challenge, but I think that if those 2 steps that I just outlined are followed, that adoption will pick up as the organization scales, and as the service catalog becomes more diverse with the offerings. It will just become such a great one-stop shop that people will be enthusiastic to go do that.
And I just add there, Mark, I have seen some examples of portals that were just really cool, where that internal design and marketing approach was so well done. There was one, for example, that was an advertising agency, and they set their their services portal up in such a way that it had all of the aspects of an ad agency. You had the graphic design, you had the publications, you had the media outlet, you had all those things represented right down to the way the icons were designed. So if you take care to represent your organization and make it attractive, remember you going back to customers and customer experience and employee experience along the way, I think there's advantage to be gained there. You can really do some cool stuff.
Exactly. I mean, think about the reason you use Southwest.com or Amazon.com. They've really optimized that experience, and you need to do that for your own employees so that it's very frictionless for them and they can get what they need. let's cover just a few more points, Roy, and I know we have one more poll question for the group. These results matter. They're very, very impactful, that by doing this, you can increase your CSAT score through doing things like this. And depending on how you measure, it could be several points, it could be several percent, multiple double-digit percent improvement because of the seamless nature of doing this employee-focused service management type strategy. It's also very smart, both in terms of the service providers and the employees as service requesters, shaving hours, even days off these different business processes across the company. People don't want to wait. None of us want to wait. So if we can shave off those dead areas, we can better serve the business and customers. And let's make these experiences meaningful as well. Roy just touched on how a service portal needs to be very intuitive and easy to use. We don't want our employees to be unhappy. We want to reduce churn in those employees and keep them retained and engaged. And I think all of us as IT leaders have a huge responsibility to help the organization evolve that way by creating these more meaningful relationships versus a request going into a black hole or an employee calling 5 or 6 people trying to get their issue resolved. So just a few results that matter. Just a few quotes from our customers. I want to point out a couple of these that are really, really interesting. If you look at First Health of the Carolinas, their comment on using Samanage is that, look, doctors and nurses can't afford to wait. They're focused on patient care. They're focused on doing what they need to. So any service request that they need as an employee needs to be fulfilled very, very quickly. And this is another organization that centralized everything on Samanage. We see Goya Foods, that have an employee empowerment strategy by allowing them to deflect a lot of this ticket volume and getting that level 1 tech involved in everything by letting employees self-serve with a portal, with knowledge articles, with out-of-the-box services that put the power back into their employees' hands. So just a couple examples here of how different organizations of varying industries and varying sizes are seeing the impact from taking on this type of strategy.
Cool. Well, I think we have one more poll question, and I think
Great.
This is an appropriate time to answer to get it answered.
It is indeed.
So I'm going to push that out. If you go to the Vote tab in your BrightTALK window, I'm going to start the voting. Have we inspired you to think differently is the question. First response, yes, it's inspired me to think more broadly about employee needs inclusive of IT and beyond. I have to focus on IT, but this could come into play in 12 to 18 months, say, and we're a couple of years away from this type of thinking. So where does your organization fit, and have we inspired you to think about this a little bit differently and maybe go back to your organization today, tomorrow, this week, and start talking about some of the advantages of looking at this employee focus in service management? And answers are coming in. Have we inspired you to think differently? We're going to keep you open here for another 15 seconds or so, and then we'll close up the voting and give you the results. In the meantime, please, before you leave today, remember to rate this webinar, give us some feedback. It's very important for us going forward. And remember that all the content is owned by HDI, and it is solely responsible for the content, and as are the speakers, solely responsible for their content, and all of it is copyright as appropriate. All right, let's stop the voting and give you the results on that. So we have about 62% that says, hey, yes, you did inspire me to think differently. That's cool. It was 60 up to 64% now, so it's 2/3 of you. I have to focus on IT, but this could come into play, 23%, so almost a quarter of you. And 11% said we're a couple of years away from it. So great. 2/3 of you have felt inspired today to maybe make some changes or recommend some changes. Mark, thank you so much for being with us today. And thank you, Samanage, for sponsoring this webinar. Remember to stay tuned for our upcoming HDI webinars. We have one, Pursuit of Service Excellence, a roundtable with 2018 award winners coming your way on June 6th at 2 p.m. And our next regularly scheduled monthly webinar is on June 19th at 1 p.m. And we'll see you next time. Thank you again, Mark Stitt and
Thank
Sam
you, Roy.
Mannix, for joining us today. You're very welcome, sir. Have a great day. Thank you so much for attending.